I'm Chuck Norris, president of the United Fine Arts Federation. This is Danny Lane.
Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Keith Vitali, and welcome to Sidekick Podcast. In this episode today, I think you're really going to enjoy this interview with my very good friend. He's a martial arts legend. His name is Danny Lane. Now, before I bring him on, let me just go over a little bit about his resume. He's a ninth degree black belt master. He's a highly decorated U.S. Marine soldier, and I can't wait for him to share some of his stories and experiences he had in Vietnam. He's a retired police officer, as well as a private investigator, and I believe he's got to work on a case later tonight as well. Now, this guy, Danny, is a phenomenal writer. He's written 3 books. And the reason I can tell you how incredible these books are is because I've read all 3 of them, and all 3 books moved me emotionally. The name of the books are Some Gave It All, Code of Steel, and American Fighter. And I hear there's some buzz going around. We'll talk about a little bit more when Netflix and Hollywood, hopefully about making one of these books into a movie. Danny's also working on a new product. It's a martial arts product. I think it's a dummy apparatus that you hit in your local karate school, and it's called the Yuki. So we'll get him to talk a little bit more about it. And as you can imagine, this legend, this icon of the martial arts, because of who he is, he's been inducted by not only his peers, but all these magazines into at least a dozen Hall of Fames, martial arts Hall of Fames. Please say hi to my good friend, Danny Lane. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Keith.
Well, listen, first of all, before we start, I just want to first say thank you for your service. I can't thank you enough for your dedication, your sacrifices. And if anybody's ever read any of your books, they would know exactly what I'm talking about to keep people like me here in America safe and free. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I would do it all over again if I had to. It's one of the best experiences of my life, even though it was one of the worst. It made me grow up and be who I am today.
And I agree. That's why we're going to talk a little bit about your military service, because it had such an impact on your life. It molded you who you are about everything else that's happened in your life. But let's talk about what you're working on today. I hear you're working on this dummy, this apparatus called the Yuki. Tell the audience what this apparatus is.
Well, the Uke is a Japanese term. It's used for receiver in martial arts, especially in jiu-jitsu and aikido. And the Uke is, old people that teach Japanese-based martial arts, the Uke is the assistant that's getting abused and thrown away all over the mat and things like that. So I come up with the name after my friend brought this thing to me, and he brought me this hand that was made out of silicone, a perfect hand, a replica, and we decided to put it on the arm and then put it on a bag, and then we did all kinds of experiments on it, and it felt so real that I was able to do my disarms of guns, knives, batons, and things that I teach in police defensive tactics, and also Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu. I could do all the movements on that hand, and around here, if I ask my wife to hold a gun or knife on me, that don't work out too well, and somebody else holds a gun on me here with the dogs. I could be here with this Uke. I could train 24 hours a day because it's always there. I could put it on the back. I could put it on a tree outside. It fits on anything round. Plus, it comes with 4 mounting holes in the back of it. You can screw it into the wall permanently if you want. Or it only weighs less than 8 pounds. It's less than 30 inches long. It's just like a human arm. It's almost like been like this here. It's got the hand on it. It's mobile. It goes 90 degrees each way, so you can do all your wrist manipulation with this arm like that. Hundreds of thousands of times, and nobody's going to scream. It doesn't feel pain. It doesn't complain, and it's always on time for the workout. So it's going to revolutionary the way people train in martial arts in these particular type of bars, because these century backs are to punch and kick. Then they come out with the bob, it has no arm. Then they come out with a jacket that goes up with bump, and it's got arms with that heavy hands. And so, as far as I know, no place in the world has something attached to a bag, or something attached to a tree, or anything round, or you can put it on the wall that has the hand that's mobile, just like the device that we're creating. In fact, it's going to be we have a patent on it. And it's already, I'm doing back orders and pre-orders right now. In fact, I got 6 yesterday. And we're probably going to start shipping them out next week and sending them out to different places like the United States Judo and Jiu-Jitsu Association. And Iran is going to use them at their center and probably endorse them. They're really excited about it. I'm going to give it to certain people, hopefully get one to you. And you're going to test it out and train with it and see what you think. Me personally, after training almost 55 years, I was so excited when I started training with him. I said, I want to have your copy. I want to jump in with you right now and get this in market before anybody else thinks about it. And that's what we're doing.
Well, that's good. I have one myself, but mine has no arms, but I can jump kick and throw side kicks and front kicks and punch it. And again, it feels no pain. It doesn't hit back, but there's never been one. I've never seen a dummy with arms and hands where you can manipulate guns and knives and everything else. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I sent you a picture that like the handbook's going to look like, but it's going to have a padded arm. So you can still attack the arm above the wrist, but then you can do all the wrist manipulations and things, weapons and harness, the stick fighting and things like that, the knives, the guns. And it can also, you put your hand in there like a wrist grab, and then you can do all the wrist manipulations to the point of locking and throwing. It's perfect to teach. I'm teaching U.S. Martial on November the 17th, all in this region. And the seminar is going to be on 4 hours of handgun disarming and handgun retention and things of that matter. So this is going to be used there too, because it's something they can have at home. And, you can train it anytime you want. Plus the schools, if they like them, they can have up to 10 or 20 on up there and have the students lined up. And, the receiver, which is the Yuki, he's not going to feel pain. He's not going to complain. He's not going to scream. He's not going to have to go to the bathroom. We can learn without suffering all these the consequences of being the Yuki.
Do you still have your partner that was your personal Yuki for, had to be 20 years. Is he still around?
Yeah, he is. He got into some security and locally and got a family, so he's not in martial arts anymore. But yeah, he's on all my videos. His name is Todd Vergo, and he was one of the Yukis. He made me look so good because I could just barely touch him fly through the air on his hip.
Right.
He was fantastic for movies stuff. But yeah, in fact, I got a comment last night. This producer that's in Poland had read my book, and he's followed me for many years, but he's done several films for Netflix. And he said, "Who's that Uki? He's really fantastic. He's been watching my videos on YouTube, actually for years," he said. He even said when he was 14 years old, he got my champion karate videos over in Poland, was training with them, the ones that Chuck Norris indoors. He said, so that was about 30 years ago. And he said, I've been knowing you since I was 14 years old. And so when he saw my book and he started reading it, he just fell in love with it, my career. So he's, him and the other writers now have it in, not development, but we haven't signed anything yet, but it's in being considered very highly for a high budget movie. He wants to go after an A-rated movie actor to play the part of me and decide how old he would be, probably in his 30s or so forth. And the book starts out when I'm like 21. But it also ends up when I'm in my 30s during this homicide investigation I'm doing against the mob. So that's how that goes down. But it's exciting. I hope it works out. And if it doesn't, at least we can talk about it.
Well, Keith Strandberg, my good friend I produce movies with, give me a call today. He lives in Switzerland. And I told him I was interviewing you. And so he said to give you say hi to you. And the first thing he said was, what about his friend, the Yuki guy? That guy was incredible. Because you would just flip him and toss him around. And so
Right.
Keith still remembered that guy.
We tell him something for me. When we come down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and he was casting for a movie down there. You were there.
Right.
And he told me to come down. He said, I said, what am I going to cast for? He said, we're trying to be a samurai or something. I said, I'm a white guy and I can't even twirl a sword, And so I auditioned with a sword. I think I cut myself and everything. I felt like a fool. And I was cutting everything like this. And there was some other Japanese guys there that were real samurai guys, and real swordsmen. And I knew I went far. And so he didn't hire me at all on the film, but he hired Todd. My assistants, I was throwing all over the place. But you can tell Keith.
Right.
I
remember that. We remember like it was yesterday because I wanted you in the film so badly. But it was a Chinese stunt coordinator named Tony Leung. He's from Hong Kong. He does. He says, "We already had the star." I said, "Well, look how good Danny is." He goes, "I know, but we had the star Gary Daniels already. I want that guy that he's tossing around." He said, "I just need guys that can flip and jump and spin and
Yeah.
react because those are the guys that make the stars look great." So that's one of the few things in movies, my career that really bothered me over the years was the fact that you are such a good friend of mine and you didn't get that part. But it happened for me too. I did a film, Force 5, and I went down there and I had Benny Akitas, Richard Norton, all these major stars there. And I went and auditioned, and Robert Klaus, who did Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, was the director. He looked at me, and after I did all my stuff, he goes, "No, he'll just be a bad guy." I'm supposed to be one of the stars in the film, and I went, "What?" I didn't even know what I did wrong. But so it was great talking to Keith today about you and the whole bit. Now, one of the things I realize is that I know how great you are as a martial artist. There's a lot of great martial artists in this country. There's so many masters, grandmasters, super grandmasters, super nims. I can't name all the names of these people, but I can tell you this, and I'm not just talking about myself, but when I was in my heyday, I was the number one fighter in the country. I was rated number one for 3 solid, consistent years. I'd come train with you. I personally, as the number one fighter in the country, bought every one of your tapes, your videotapes on jujitsu, on how to defend yourself and all the different moves. I studied them like I was a white belt and, starting a new
Yeah.
system. And I was always amazed by you because the trick, it's like all great masters, you make it look so easy. But then when you get out there and try to do it, it just takes experience and time to make it look as easy as you made it look. But people go, "Well, I'm the top fighter in the country. Why do I need to buy videotapes?" Because I realized, I don't know, I think they're out of the 3 in the whole world that I knew personally, you were one of the 3 best I've ever seen. Like the Michael D and then, Professor Wally J and his dad, those people, you were right up there. You're as good as I've ever seen.
Well,
So I can
funny thing
understand
about
why
that,
you're
yeah.
such a legend.
Funny thing about that, Keith, is I never did study with a jujitsu instructor. Never. In fact, we went around different seminars. You were at my camp all the time, and we always had Michael D. Pasquale, we had Robert McEwen, Keto. We had some great people. I would watch just like you, and I go buy their videos. And I remember buying a video. I forget the name of it. Al Thomas was a jujitsu guy. He put it out, did real well. It's like 12 basic moves. So I studied by buying videos and watching people taking notes. And I'm self-taught. Everything I did was pretty much self-taught. Well, and I was doing a demonstration in New York at a kickboxing event, and Michael D. Pasquale's father and several other high-ranking masters from New York City were there. It was a big event. I was going into the ring, and I did jiu-jitsu demonstrations. So when I come out of the ring, Michael D's dad called me over. He said, Danny, I didn't know you knew jiu-jitsu. I said, yeah, I'd like to do it and everything. And he promoted me to 6th degree right there. It's this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
I got
love
this
Michael.
certificate right in there. I went from
I
nothing
like
to
Michael
6th
D.
degree. You run that?
Yeah, I love Michael D and his dad. I was really close with his dad, hung out with him whatever chance I could get when I came up to New York. God, that guy was good. And he always had Professor Wally J with him too. That guy was like a magician. He was
Well,
he was fantastic.
while he was on the film that we did, the cutoff, which you starred in, he's just such an encyclopedia of knowledge. And, what I learned from Professor J was a small circle jiu-jitsu because, you kind of have excessive movement in these movements and your wrist locks and things like that. It's excessive. So he tightens everything down to about a quarter. So the small circle jiu-jitsu was his forte and what he was famous for. And I started shortening up my moves, using more, instead of using, I got more energy and power by relaxing and then torquing at the end. And it just made all the difference in the world to my application. So once I took the basic jujitsu moves, I applied the small circle philosophy of Wally J. And so I've had them inside the piano as well.
Wow. I never knew where you learned all of yours. I know you had it was conglomerate of a lot of different systems, a lot of styles, because you studied with everybody and you had such a close relationship with one of your mentors, Chuck Norris. So really you could do it all, the stand-up fighting. You won a lot of tournaments. You were decorated, you were a champion, but also you crossed over to the jiu-jitsu world that I never really did. I did some, but I had to literally buy your tapes to learn and study just when I was teaching myself. So it's kind of interesting to hear that you were doing the same thing, buying tapes and learning at the same time.
Well, there's pictures of me, and I don't know where they are, but I'm wearing this gray karate uniform, and I got that from you because you used to wear the gray karate uniform. The washed out gray uniform. I love that. You come to my camp wearing it one time. I say, I got to have one of it. I love that. I mean, there's a video on YouTube with me wearing it. I'm doing these kicks that I learned from Jean-Claude Van Damme and stuff, and I've got that on. It was so comfortable. I felt just like, I was like a champion. I'm wearing this because Keith Vitali fights it. And so I kind of copied that from you too.
I was a little offended because I was looking at your resume on your sites, and you've got a phenomenal bio. And in your bio, these are the people you've trained with and been impacted by. My name was nowhere on that bio. You had 25
Really?
people's names. You need to go type my name in someplace.
Well, it'd be first because, you have such an influence on me. 'Cause, I mean, I can never kick like you. I can never be as fast as you because you were the absolute best point fighter. I've seen a lot of them. I'm talking about all in the 60s and 70s. As far as speed, mobility, offense, defense, your deception, your fakes, your setups, and things like that. I mean, I still watch your video fights on YouTube all the
Oh, I
time.
appreciate it.
And,
Well, I appreciate because I really did. We developed a good, close relationship because I'd come down to your camp. I'd come down to visit you all the time. And I loved it because in your camp, I would just say, line them up and I'd fight them one at a time. And I'd have to go through those fighters, and they were tough fighters. But I was always in pretty
yeah.
good shape, and it was really during my heyday. So I always loved your camp. You had a great camp.
First time I saw you, I was with Chuck Norris at the Battle of Atlanta. We were watching, I mean, he did some book signings earlier today and things like that. I'm not sure what movie it was or what even year it was, but probably in the 80s. We were sitting in the audience, come up in the ring, boxing ring, I think it was. You were so fast. You were all over this guy. I mean, like a hornet, coming after somebody. And I said, who in the world is that? I mean, that guy's so incredibly fast. And Chuck, I'm like, I don't know if he told me your name at that time, but we know that you were affiliated with Joe Corley, I think, and from down there. And I think, we got to know you, and I heard your name at that time. You just went straight up to number one, over the next year or something. You were young at that time, younger. I'm thinking I'm not really sure if it was in the early 80s or not. It had to be in early 80s, probably 81, 82, 3.
Yeah, it
Somewhere.
was back in those early days, and I really loved my relationship with Chuck Norris as well because he had an impact on me. Because when I became a fighter, he was somebody I could look up to and emulate. Joe Louis had muscles coming out of just everywhere. He was big, strong, and heavyweight, and I couldn't fight and copy him exactly because of the size difference. And then there were smaller fighters like Howard Jackson, but Chuck Norris is close to my size. We had similar technique, and I went, "That's a guy who can steady." And then what he was so really good at is what you were good at. It's not about technique, it's as much about using your head. He was such a smart fighter. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed all the Chuck Norris black belts because they were really good guys and had good attitudes and good fighters. Chip Wright, there were so many of you guys.
Chip Wright's one of the most incredible fighters I've ever seen. From both legs, both sides. I mean, any direction, he could hit you with anything. But, I was so lucky when I met Chuck. I was still caught. I was a homicide detective, and I was going back and forth in L.A., taking time off from work and everything, working with him. He was getting ready for movies, and I'd work out a couple of weeks and go back. And, I got to know him first. We got friends enough for enough time to stay at his house, and we would train every day. And in his house, everybody would come by. Bill Wallace, Richard North, Howard Jackson was there all the time. I mean, it was just like everybody working out. Bob Wall, I can keep naming them. And, I did John Claude Van Damme with pictures of me and John Claude and Chuck in
Right,
1984.
right.
Those are his story. And so I got to learn from everybody. So I got the firsthand look at Chuck and how he worked his sparring and stuff. And, he was. I mean, he wasn't overly fast. He wasn't overly strong, but he was smart. He had incredible timing. And, Chuck did this something called visualization, and affirmation. And he did this mental training. Like, once he got in the ring, he'd already fought you 20 times or 100 times. So he knew what to do. But if you watch some of the old videos, I mean, they're very old and grainy on YouTube of him versus Joe Lewis, I think Thomas the Clubback, some of these guys, I don't know, Lou Gago or whatever it is. I mean, you can see him contemplating and setting up and, using rhythm, broken rhythm. He's just using all the things. He was ahead of his time. And, even though he came out of Thomas Rowe, he incorporated all the other things into his fighting system.
Right. No, you're right. He had such an impact, not just on me, but on the style of fighting that we started doing. Because his group of people started the dash punch, the Howard Jackson, and while the rest of the country and the world was stand still fighting, they were blitzing. They were coming off that back foot and hitting people. So,
Well,
those were just
I mean,
great
that's
people.
that was the what we call attacking drills, nothing but blitzes. Fake, and they go, just rapid fire combination, overwhelming the person. Getting them on the first one, you get them on 2, 3, 4, 5, you're going to score. You just put a flurry on them. But, it all come up with your rhythm and closing distance and then going. That's what Chuck would do. He bounced back and forth and he would inch close, and all of a sudden he's right on you.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I started training with him. I was 30 and he was 40. So we were still young enough to, get some really good workouts in. He just done the octagon. So the very first video you see of me is from 8mm black and white, where I'm working out with him to our first day. There's a video, we're doing these circle drills like in the octagon, where he's knocking all these people out, like in the movie. So we're still doing this for practice. So that's on YouTube as well. So that's some historic footage that I filmed in November of 1980. I'm glad I had the camera at that time.
Yeah, I interviewed Richard Norton too. I love Richard Norton. He's another one of my mentors, and Richard would train like you say with you and Chuck Norris, and his first movie was the Octagon, and so he talked a lot about that, and that movie really had an impact on the rest of his life as well. Chuck really, I don't know if he realizes the impact he's had on all of us. It's like Bruce Lee was the first one to have an impact on most martial artists. We go to the movies, see his films, but he was distant. Even though he might have been in LA, we never could touch him or reach out. Chuck Norris was somebody who was local, who was there, who was more like us, and he just really had an impact on millions of martial artists over the years.
Well, Chuck loves people. And just a few weeks ago, he was in London at the Comic-Con again, meeting people, taking pictures, shaking hands. I mean, he loves people. He loves talking to people. And a total stranger can come up to Chuck and start talking about anything. And Chuck will get him his full attention and talk to him to pretend. He's always done that.
Yep.
He's always been gracious enough to sign autographs. I mean, I've been with him hundreds of times in public settings, and where people will come up at the arenas on these kickboxing matches. You'll stand for hours and sign autographs, and he never gets tired of it. He's never complained about it. He's always done that. Because I remember when he first started, I think it was Breaker or one of the others. He went out and rented some movie theater and played those early movies in there to try to get the crowd to come in. So I mean, he's paid his dues so much, he deserves everything he's got. But he's just as humble. I mean, he's even more humble in real life than he is. I mean, he's nothing like the Walker character and stuff like this. He's so easygoing. He's so gracious about everything. So I enjoy spending time with him. He was luckily here at an event. So him and his wife pulled us up, and my wife and I got to spend a couple of hours with him not long ago. And hopefully we'll get to see each other soon, this year on some project. Never know.
Well, if you do, say hi for me. After I did Revenge of the Ninja, he called me personally on the phone, and so gracious. I mean, who does that? Calls me up on the phone and says, "Keith, I just want to let you know I thought you did a good job, Revenge of the Ninja." It was my first film, and I was nervous, but I kind of went. I just couldn't believe he would call me. He's just that kind of a gracious, humble person. Very nice.
Further than there's not a chapter, but there's a section in my new books. One of the 3 books I actually have just released. And it's actually American Fighter. It's kind of a compilation of my childhood, where I had this troubled childhood. I was sick. I was given up at birth, and I was homeless as a teenager. So I put myself through school, and I was turned to the world with crime to survive. And then I had to join the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War to get off the streets and go into prison. So that's in the American Fighter. So that starts out that way. Then I'm fighting in the war in Vietnam. Then I come out within 2 weeks. I'm already in the state police academy, going to be a police officer. So for 15 straight years, I'm fighting these criminals. And so plus, in the early 70s, 1971, I met my Taekwondo instructor, Master Kong. I started Taekwondo. So I became a Taekwondo champion well before I got into the open circuit. And that was in 75, 76, 77. I won the U.S. Open in the lightweight division. I won the grand championship 2 of those years. They had some great people: Joe Hayes, Gerald Roberts, Tucker Warren. I mean, I was competing against all this thing, and I went 4 years and didn't win one place in any tournament when I was a young black belt. So you had to pay your dues. I watched all the time, and I was getting close all the time. I said, one of these days it's going to be my time. So in January of 75, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and there was about 100 people in my division. And I'd worked all night as a cop and drove 3.5 hours to get there. And I was drinking a cup of coffee. I'm thinking, I just want a place, I just want a trophy. I've been training about 4 years. And so I got out there fighting. And the very first guy, I must have been half asleep, but he split my leg down. I mean, all the way down. And the EMS was called to the ring. They wanted to take me to the hospital. I said, no, I just got here to fight. Just go ahead and tape it up or do something. And so I guess it triggered something in me. But the rest of the day, nobody touched me. It was like this out-of-body experience coming over me, like the Lord said, this is your time. And that's what I call it, the piece of my book, it's your time, because it was a God-given thing where I just started spinning and kicking, and I had the incredible timing. Boom, everything was going well. And so I win that whole thing, the lightweight thing. And so I'm going to fight the middleweight in the grand championship to have the right to fight the light heavyweight and heavyweight guy. You know what I mean? And so, I went and got something to eat, something to drink, and went back. Same thing happened. Beat the middleweight with no trouble. Then I got against this heavyweight. We went around and around and around. I guess he was a pretty much favorite. I wasn't getting any scores. It was overtime. Here I am. I'm about 150 pounds, and he's like 240 pounds. And he's as fast as I am, and he's charging me all the time. So something come into my head. I said, as soon as he charged, I'm going to take 2 steps back, jump up, and try to do a spinning heel kick. If I hit him with that, the crowd will go crazy, and the judges have to call it. But if I stand still and try to punch him in the body, the judges might not see that. He'll run over top of him, and beat me up. So I did that. Here he comes like a charging bull. So I take a couple steps back, jump, and here he comes right into it with his face. Crowd went crazy. It's just like a dream come true, like, no. And so I'm the grand champion. And I drank home by myself that night, after his long day of working the night before in the streets. Hadn't been asleep in bed. My lips got down. I go to the hospital. They said, you need plastic surgery. So I had to go 2 more days before I could get 23 stitches in my lip. It's one of those God-given things, like, it's your crime. You paid your dues. Now I'm going to do these moves for you. It's one of those deals, and you probably felt it because you move so fast that you do things and then you think about them later. You know how you move first and then you think about it later, like, oh man, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Because you watch it back on film and you have no conscious recollection what you were thinking, because good fighters like you, we do it and then think about it later. It's too, if you have to think about it, it's too late. It was one of those days.
It's got to be reflexive. Yeah, it's got to be
3 years.
and reflective.
Pardon me?
I was going to say, you're right. The moves have to be almost reflexive, instinctive. If you have to mentally think about it, it's too late. It's just because of your experience and repetition, it comes normally for you.
That's where the
here's one of the reasons I want to do this podcast with you and others like you is I just want to reintroduce people like you to a whole new generation of martial artists who have no clue who guys from our generation are. As a matter of fact, some of the newer karate schools have never heard of, get this, Chuck Norris. Forget about the Joe Lewises and Bill Wallaces and Jeff Smiths. They have no clue who these people are. It's not their fault. We no longer have the magazines like we had during our time. I've seen you on covers of magazines. I've seen your articles that you had, because back then, the magazines, there was a group of them, followed the tournament fighters or martial artists. They wrote stories on you. They put you on covers. And those covers created stars who went all over the world. These magazines went all over the world. So people knew who, icons like you were. Now, these new karate schools all over the country, there's probably a karate school in every shopping center now. And within a year of taking martial arts, they still have no idea of the history. So my job as a podcast is really is to pay forward. I don't care about anything. I just want to celebrate your life and people like you. And I want people to go online and go, I had no idea this guy who he was. And they'll go, because they have no clue. There's no magazines to look up. They can't go to the bookstore and pull them out like we could during our generation. So I think we lived in a blessed generation. We had it all. We had the great Joe Lewis's and Bob Walls and all these great guys that you mentioned. You worked out with all of them, which is just, if people knew your history, they'd flip out. But I want to reintroduce guys like you. So I'm so happy to do this podcast for you. I want people all over the world. I've got like fans from like 45 countries around the world. I want them to be looking at this going, I had no clue who this guy is. And now I know who you are. I know
Yeah.
that the military had such a profound effect on your life. And I just wanted you to share, because when I read, some gave it all, I was in tears half the time. That book's got to be made into a movie. I know Chuck Norris feels the same
Yeah.
way about it. How can that book not be made into a movie? I loved
Well,
it. But
first of all,
tell me about your
yeah,
experience when you first got into getting on the helicopter. You come from boot camp. You just come from West Virginia, get on your helicopter. Now you're in Vietnam. What happened to you? Tell me about that experience. Share that experience with the listeners.
well, it started back. Some gave it all. Actually, it was a bestseller for a good while. Chuck Norris endorsed it. So, he endorsed it right here on the top, right here. And actually, this picture right here is a story about this picture. Of course, if you read the book, you read about the Greek. The Greek was a guy from Greece, and he and I were in boot camp together. We were in infantry trained together. We went to Vietnam together. We went to the same battalion, went to the same regiment, went to the same company, went to the same platoon, went to the same squad, same fire team, and same foxhole. Now, what's the odds of that? 1 in a million? Because, so, he and I become friends from the time we were the first day in boot camp at Paris Island in May of '68. After 6 months of training, he and I are jumping out of a helicopter in the middle of the night in the jungle at 4 a.m. in the morning in the monsoon with the rain going in a hot LZ. That means the enemy's on the ground firing up and the helicopter, and bullets are really the helicopter. And the back door goes down, and the machine gunners are shooting, and everybody says out. Well, it was dark. There was no lights down there. When I jumped out, I thought the ground was close. We hit been as much as 100 feet in there. I don't 50 feet or something. I didn't think I would ever hit the ground. I always said, I used to be 6'2", but now I'm 5'10". When I hit the ground, my body it was such a thud. And we had 100 pounds of ammo and everything on our back, with all these shells and grenades and ammunition for machine guns and stuff. That's our first day. I mean, we were in Vietnam. That was the second day. We got in there the first day. We got our uniform, all brand new green. Our boots are all shiny and everything. And everybody knows we're boots, so they don't even want to be around us. Nobody told us nothing. Nobody told us where we're going to go. And as you read the book, that Rick and I got separated from our units. We were surrounded by the enemy for hours in the jungle, waiting for daylight to come so we could find our way out or sneak our way out without being killed. So, that's how that book started and so forth. But this particular picture, the machine gun, and I had this superimposed. After I started writing the book, I reconnected with the Greek in Cleveland and went to see him. My wife, Gina, and I went to see him in Sophie. He had this picture. Remember, he used to have a low-estimatic Kodak camera that he would snap pictures of us doing things, and he would send them back to Sophie, his girlfriend. So 50-some years later, this picture showed up in his album in Cleveland, and I made it, put it on the cover. In fact, it's on the cover of the American Fighter, which has now come out. This is in the hardback, so it's right here on the bottom, right here. But here's me in the machine gun here, and here's me doing the sidekick up here, and then there's a real picture of me in the SWAT uniform. So it's about those three careers. It's about me being a Marine and a karate fighter and cop in this whole book and one compilation. I just new. I haven't even done the news release on it yet. It's on Amazon now to buy in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. But if they want personalized copies, they just go to my website, DannyLane.com, and just click on the logo, and it comes to me, and I sign it. Those personalized a message to this person that sent me a request for an autograph for that.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I have all 3 books. I, purchased your last 2 books on Kindle, and the reason I like Kindle is I have an iPad, and sometimes, I'm getting older, and it's hard sometimes to read any books. So with a Kindle, I can increase and enlarge the font. So as I'm reading, it makes it much easier for me, but that's your last book right there. That's that's probably gonna be the one they put it to make into a movie.
One thing I did, Keith, with this, it's kind of untraditional. Like my last was made by a big publisher. They let me have 10 pictures and they made me put them all in the back. And this book, I put pictures in if it was at the tournament, was I was fighting, if I had pictures there, or if it was more connected, put the pictures in along with the stories. With somebody reading it, that there's the grave and we're burning down a bit, village. I mean, it's very rough when I'm talking about it. You don't have to go in the back and catch it later. If I'm fighting in a tournament, like here's where we got a machine gun, and a raid of the cop and things like that. So I integrated the pictures into the story immediately when you're reading that part, so it had more impact. So that was one thing I kind of did against Chris, because I self-published these books. That way I had full control of it.
I highly recommend the books. I tell you what, it's so emotional for me because I have my father who served in the military. I have 2 brothers who served in the military. One of my brothers, the colonel, wrote the foreword for one of your books. Colonel Steve Vitali, and then my son Travis. He fought in the Iraq War and he was in 27 firefights.
Wow.
So as a dad, I never personally entered the military, but I don't know, it's harder being in the foxhole like you were or having your son in that foxhole and having to deal with it, at home. It's tough on both of us. But it almost wants me to go punch out people, and I mean, when I hear people critical about our country and patriotism, and I would read your book and come into tears about what you went through, I just want to go hit somebody in the face. Now, of course, people are going to say, bite me and I hate you and the whole bit, but you sacrificed so much. And my
Yeah.
family members did too, as well as millions of others. But all in my mind, I just kept on thinking, yeah, just months before, you're sitting in a bar drinking a beer in West Virginia. You have no direction, you're just lost. Within a month, you're in Vietnam, you're in the high grass, you're surrounded by the Vietnamese, and you don't know if you're going to die or not. And I'm like I'm reading a book like this
Yeah.
going, I got to put it down. It's
Yeah,
intense.
later that night after we got separated, jumping off the helicopter, because we got separated, we got punished. So we had to go on an ambush. Me and the Greek and 2 guys have been there one day longer than us. And they're in the book called, we call it Combat, and one is called the Combat and Nip. Anyway, we're sitting out there. They got one day in Vietnam longer than us. We're there our second day. They're there 3 days. We're on an ambush, totally away from the company and everybody. So we're supposed to see there. And if we see movement or they would attack us first to get to the company, we're supposed to signal, hey, there's people out here in the enemy. So I'm sitting there on first watch. We don't dig a hole very deep. We don't really know what to do. But, in the middle of the night, I guess they started sneaking up on us. So I was just sitting there thinking about what I read about in the book, driving a 57 Chevy, shooting some pool, drinking a beer, just a few months ago, maybe I made a big mistake, And all of a sudden I hear this cork pop like you pull a cork out of a wine bottle. It goes pop. And that's the sign, in training of a Chinese communist grenade. They call them Tricom. I heard this pop, and then all of a sudden I heard something land behind us, like a pop bottle or something. I screamed incoming, and then all of a sudden the explosion went up and dirt flew everywhere and stuff went all over us. And then they opened up with these automatic weapons. Well, like I said, we didn't have much of a hole, so all 4 of us are in this fighting to get in this little hole and hiding down so much. So, they kept shooting at us, and I said, I'm thinking, if I don't shoot back, they're going to come up here and kill me. So I started holding my rifle up and not looking. I started doing all those things, and shooting 30 rounds from one to the other. Pretty soon, second by second, I got just a little bit braver. And then the company would shoot up illumination to light up the sky so we could see the silhouette in the dark. And then we got to looking over, then we got real brave, we started wiping them out and so forth. But it was one of those things that you have to overcome fear before you can survive. And if you can't overcome fear, you'll die. And I teach that today, not just in martial arts, but also I'm an expert in youth support. And I testify in court regularly on support when people kill people and with guns and things like that. And so the pendulum that decides the use of force, there's one of many, but the first thing is this: if you can't overcome fear, you can't react. And there's two types of people. People, when fear comes, they will fight, and the other person will flee. So it's called a fight or flee defense. All people and all humans have a built-in self-defense mechanism, even if they're intoxicated or they're drugged. It's like putting your hand on a stove. Well, you don't have to think about, oh, that's hot, I better move my hand. I mean, immediately you pull your hand off of a hot stove. So that's called an autonomic reflex reaction. That's something that we all have. We react to certain stimulus, and one of them is fear. So if you walk into a room and you get cold chills or goosebumps all over you, you sense something. That's a fear that you didn't predict and you didn't put on yourself, and it's something that comes automatically. Autonomic means automatic, kind of, but we all have that. I studied very deeply, and I testified to the law in court because, like I said, there's a fight or flee. It's just like you in the tournament. You see a big champion or something, you either fight or you're going to run, and he's going to whip you. And, humans are like that. And what we do as teachers, we try to get them to overcome that fear to react under fire. So in combat, if you can't react under fire and overcome fear, you're going to get killed or you're going to get somebody else killed. It was the biggest thing I learned. It was the mental and not the physical thing, but the psychology, what you had to learn, and also the emotional and the psychology of overcoming the fear to do. I've never been afraid to try to be, everything I accomplished, I kind of set goals for. And that's one thing in checklist success before. I set goals and, I did everything I could, all the setbacks and stuff. And I wasn't ever afraid to think I couldn't get onto the cover of a magazine. I knew I would have to pay my dues, be in the right place at the right time, meet the right people, but I put myself out there to have the opportunity. Everywhere I went, I always looked for an opportunity to meet somebody that could influence my life. And that's how my life has been. You can't do it by sitting at home and never leaving. You got to get on the plane. You got to get on in the car. You got to go places. And, it's just like I met you. If I hadn't traveled to Atlanta and seen you fighting down there, I probably wouldn't have known who you were, except for the magazine, just by to the camp. And, we been on movie sets and things together over the years. I mean, it's just wild how we have this wild journey that we all go on. We're still fortunate enough to be here after all these years and tell these stories. One reason I'm writing the books is not to make money, but it's a form of therapy for me from the post-traumatic stress that I've suffered ever since I've come back from Vietnam. I've had a lot of trouble with it.
That's going to be my next question. How did that affect you once you came back? In what ways did it affect you?
Well, it affected me in every way. First of all, they didn't call it post-traumatic stress until about 1984. So I got it back in 1970. So I was having these mental complications. I was a conflict at the time. I had all this anxiety, but I loved action. So I was on midnight shift. I'm fighting these guys and shooting cars up, as you'll see in my new book. I'm fighting and beating people up. My supervisor would say, "Hey, you're not in a war zone anymore. You can't be shooting up the city." And because, we're all responsible for that. So you're not in Vietnam anymore. You're not in a free fire zone. So you have to, watch where you're shooting and things like that. And so, for the first 5 years, I struggled with it. And they didn't really have anything except Prozac and things like that. But I got into drinking alcohol a lot just to try to calm my nerve, just enough to act normal. But I still have the anxiety. But I was still suffering just years ago. Well, actually, 7 years ago, still suffering. My wife Dina just said, why don't you start writing out all these things that's happened to you and all your frustrations and facing them? Because I was going to a psychologist and therapy and reading and medicine. It just didn't help. I started writing. That's how Some Gave It All come about. It was my therapy session. And so I met a co-writer who was one of my students, and he was a co-writer, read books with Zig Ziglar and stuff, mostly business books. And so he wrote the book with me along with my story. And so that's how that book come about. It was my therapy to get this out of my head, out to the public, and confess that I committed atrocities. We did things in war that we didn't want to, but
Right.
it still troubles us. I mean, a veteran comes back, you suffer the rest of your life. It's just a matter of can you deal with it. I'm dealing with it better now, and I'm 74 years old, but it's still every night I don't sleep. I'm hyperactive. Anything that goes around. Of course, I was a cop for 15 years. I have that training. I'm a martial artist, so I'm hypersensitive to everything. But I'm still on guard, still on duty, still ready to go.
Right. No.
And it's hard to let it go.
That's why I have sometimes I fear sharks in the ocean. I'll have nightmares where I kick my legs thinking a shark is biting me. I couldn't imagine
Oh
actually
wow.
being in combat like you, having somebody jump in a foxhole and you have to go hand to hand combat like you had to do.
Yeah.
So I can understand the stress that anxiety over the years and they're just now coming to terms and putting semantics to it and trying to address it. But also, when you came back, that wasn't a popular war. Vietnam was not a popular war at all. And when you came back, the soldiers were not celebrated like the soldiers that came back from the Iraq wars. Now everybody
Yeah.
buys them a beer, tells everybody, hey, thanks for your service. But when you guys came back for that Vietnam War, I remember. And you guys came back, you get off the plane, you had just been in combat, and then people treating you like crap because they were calling you baby killers and half the country were just
Mm.
insane. It was just a rough time. That must have affected you emotionally as well.
Yeah, well, you read that in the book. The great got severely wounded. I mean, it was his third time, and I thought he was dead in September of 1969. And so I had to spend the last 4 months there on my own, leading my own squad. And I got wounded several times. And so in December of 69, I'd been there for a year. The Marines were supposed to stay there 13 months at least. But we got the word President Nixon was doing a trip withdrawal. So they said, well, you're a short timer. I had like 20 days to go or something. They said, well, you're going home. Well, that was a big deal. And I was glad. But anyway, I had to stand bunker watch at the rear area, and we got attacked that night. I almost got killed that night before that I could get out of there. Then I got shipped to Da Nang, which is the bigger city where the plane land. We can get our flight out. And I'm thinking, I'm going to fly back. I'm going to be in San Diego tomorrow. They said, no, you're going home on the USS Iwo Jima, an aircraft carrier. And they had some cameras there for the political reasons to shoot us climbing up the ropes on the side of this big aircraft carrier. And I'm so weak just from the malaria and heat and everything. I could hardly get up there. I think I'm going to die on these ropes before I get to the top of this aircraft carrier, just so these people could shoot the video. But it took us 30 days to float all the way from Vietnam to San Diego. As soon as we got there, there was no cameras, no parade, no nothing. He marched us off of there and put us in some cattle cars, they call them. It's a transport for troops. Made us go to these barracks, go out and pick up cigarette butts that people left behind, just treat us like pieces of scum. So we stayed there and got psychologically examined until they felt that we were safe enough to put back in society. So every time they asked me a question if I was all right, if I was having dreams, I said, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine. Well, I wasn't even 21. You read that in the book. I was so angry because I come back from war, 2 Purple Hearts, fighting, killing people. I can't even drink a beer because I'm not old enough. So we tried to get in a bar to listen to music. So, I had the 2 AK-47s that were souvenirs that I got the dead bodies of the people we killed. And so I sold them and got money and went on the black market and got fake IDs so I could drink a beer and shoot some pool, I go to the bar and I try to get in and show them my Marine ID. And they said, hey, you're not 21 yet. I just got back from Vietnam. They said, we don't care. Get in here. You're not old enough. I mean, that really bothered me.
Yeah, it bothered me too, reading in a book that it took a couple of days to fly you over, but it took 30 days to bring you back. They had an urgency to get you there. They didn't have the urgency to take care of you and bring you back. And that's such awful. But I remember my family was in the military, and remember being around military people during that era, and it was just a hard time. And it was so divisive even back then, like it is today. So when people read your book, if they see your movie, they're going to have appreciation of what people like you actually went through to keep us safe. I always go, you have no clue reason we're here in American states and we can do what we can do, and you can criticize all you want to criticize because that guy was in a foxhole fighting for your life, and that's the lesson in school that everybody should take away from our history right there. So I can't
Well,
thank you enough for everything you did. And the fact is, I know you personally when you came back as well. I knew you over the years. I've known you for a long time. And I knew it affected you emotionally and mentally, and you would have to fight through it, and you just really did. You have ebbs and flows. My son's the same thing. When he came back from the Iraq War, he had 27 live firefights, and his captain came to me and said, "Watch your son." They said he was in battle so many times, and it did. It took him years to get over the post
yeah,
traumatic
well,
just things he had to deal with, and he's a young man. He was a young man having to do that. Um, so you got
I
back
would
to the
encourage him
States.
to
Yeah.
have him write out his memoirs, and write him out and face them and deal with them head on. And I quit having the bad dreams, vivid dreams, like the one the sapper jumped into foxhole with me. I had to stab him to kill him before I got blown up with the explosives. And that was one of the reoccurring dreams I had for years. And there was one other one where I had to shoot into a friendly village because there was enemy embedded in there, and I killed a lot of innocent civilians.
Yeah, that's
And I
awful.
really felt bad about it. And I still feel bad about that. I had to kill these innocent people, but they had the enemy was right in there attacking us from the village. So we had to destroy the village to take out the enemy. And with my machine gun, I could see the people going down as I was shooting. And that's haunted me ever since. But I don't have the dream anymore. I don't dream much anymore at all. To tell you the truth. Writing the book, just like my wife saw, facing it on and asking for forgiveness. And that was another thing. I don't know, it's all right to go to war and kill people, but if you kill people over here, you go to prison for life. 18 and 19 years old, I can kill people as many as I want in the free fire zone under the rules of combat. I come back to America, even if I kill somebody legally, there's a chance I can go to prison for life. And the rules of combat were different as a Marine than they were as a cop. So I had trouble. With the rules of combat in Vietnam, and also the rules of procedure as a police officer on what I could and couldn't do. And besides that, I was under so much scrutiny as a police officer and so many witnesses. I mean, it was just a different thing. So we struggled a lot. Thank goodness back in 1970s, we didn't have cameras on every corner. And the police officers didn't have body cams and things because we had to do things and we did basically the old school way. I mean, we took care of business, and that's the way we did. We had the police through intimidation, and it was a time of racial unrest. In fact, there were several riots right after the in-state riots and killings. We had a big riot at Marshall University in Huntington. There was almost thousands of people, students on the campus rioting and burning the city and turning over police cars and things like that. And that's in my book, Code of Steel, in 1970. And they were protesting the Vietnam War. And I mean, it was a hard time. Like you said, I come home to that. 2 weeks I'm within the state police academy. And with 12 weeks, I'm on the street by myself patrolling again, just like being in Vietnam. I drop in the helicopter. Now, the book opens up, as you may know, I'm in the police car, and it's my first felony car, and I get in this chase with it. The
You're
high-speed
shooting
chase
the
with this
you're
people.
shooting the car, the windows
Yeah,
out of the
yeah,
car.
yeah, yeah. They're coming burglary, so I'm shooting, bam, 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 bullets are going all over the place. I finally shoot out the window, and the car flips up in the
Right.
air and rolls into this car, into the house. So I'm back in Vietnam. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. But then the supervisor looks at me and says, "You know, you should be
You're not
doing
back to
that."
the yeah. I remember reading that, and
Yeah,
the guy goes,
just had to,
luckily he knew you, and he had compassion for you because I think he was a fellow Marine as well. And he goes, listen, you're not back into war right now, but it would be hard to separate it. They'd just be going from a couple weeks there, and then why did you? What was the impetus for you to become a police officer? Was it something to do with your stepdad?
that's right. A guy named Oliver Lay, he married my biological mother. And she wasn't my mother. She gave me up at birth. She was my mother. She didn't raise me. She met this uh, police officer named Oliver Lane. He'd been in the Marines in the Army. And I was kind of sickly and asthmatic, and she was a nurse. So I ended up going to the hospital for a while. And so one thing and another, she asked me to live with her for a while. So he became my stepdad, changed my name. Biological name is Jeffers, Jeffers. And my name is Lane now at 10 years old. But he was a Huntington police officer. So when I was 14, 4 years later, on December the 23rd of 1963, he comes home with two other policemen, and one of them was that police officer that reprimanded me that night. He was with him, Jimmy Hunter. And they get out and they have a few drinks, a few beers, shooting your guns off with some beer cans and things like that, having some fun. They just got off duty. And the other two cops pull off and go up the driveway. And he takes a couple of steps, puts his arm around me, and drops dead right in front of me. So as he's laying there, and I'm screaming for the other people to come and help, and I'm running after the car, and I go back to I made a promise to myself, I'll become a cop someday to make you proud of me, because you took a chance on me. So one day I'm going to be a cop. So I started to stay in the Marine Corps because I would have been a sergeant, got a duty station in Spain, a promotion and more money. But I said, no, I'm on this mission. I have to go be a cop because I promised him I would. I had made some contact with the Friends of Peace at the Corps, and they said, come in. When you get 21, the day I become 21, I was old enough to be a cop. I went down and filled out the application. They hired me a week later. Within weeks, I was in the police academy with 17 other guys. In fact, most of the people I write about in the new book, this is called Code of Steel. It's about our code, the code that police officers have, just like Marines have for them over there. The brotherhood and things in the Marine. The Code of Steel is our code that we have as unwritten, unspoken code, but it was unbreakable between us. So if something went down, it got put under a bench. We were just like unbreakable. They couldn't break us to try to red out on somebody. It's like a code blue. It's kind of like Brothers in Blue and things like that. It was our code that we developed of this small group of Vietnam veterans that come back, that we stuck together. We went into battle together at night. We come home. We made sure everyone finished the shift at night. But even though we're an American, it's like going to war, except you just doing 8 hours a day, like that. So that's how code is still come about. So,
How long were you placed
yeah, I'm
on?
just jumping up right at 15 years, and I took an early retirement because that's another story. It's in the book. Is in heaven to have the homicide detective. I was investigating a federal witness, a female federal witness that ended up dead. And unknowingly to me, she had given testimony to the FBI about some very prominent mafia people that her boyfriend was involved with. A mafia figure out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and also, even though he was missing at the time, it involved Jimmy Hopper. This businessman that used to be prevalent in our area and also lived in Fort Lauderdale. He was one of their Teamsters union, Teamsters leaders, and he was an associate of Jimmy Hopper, and all of them were indicted. These cops on our department, Nicholas Twill and Jimmy Hopper in Nashville in 1963. I have all the newspaper articles and everything on it. They were indicted on jury tampering because they were trying to, Robert Kennedy was trying to send Jimmy Hopper to prison for intimidating him and trying to have him killed. This whole thing goes back. Well, unknowingly to me, in 1963, my father, stepfather Oliver, was a detective, and he was investigating those same cops and that same businessman, Nicholas Twill and Huntington, were doing all kinds of corruption and things within the city. And they put a bomb under his car and tried to kill him. But, what happened is a few months later when he died, that case went away because Oliver's dead, but he died of natural causes. They didn't kill him. But 17 years later, I'm investigating the same people, going after the same people he was trying to take down when he was a cop. This time they were accessories in this murder. It involved running drugs from Colombia, South America, into Miami and also into our area. And this cop, that was a captain in our department, was covering up for the guy that I arrested that killed the girl, and I killed the girl because he coached her. He coached him how to do it, how to muffle the sound, how to wipe everything clean, how to do everything perfect, because he always bragged, I can commit the perfect murder until he met me. But after 5 years and 3 trials, and the mafia intimidating our witnesses and me, and trying to set me up on burglary and rape and drug charges with false testimony and stuff, I decided to go kill the police captain. So the thing ends with a showdown with him and I at City Hall. We in the dirty police captain. There's a point that Chuck Norris calls me and says, "Hey, you want to come to Chicago and be in Code and Silence?" It's that movie you read about dirty cops. And so I went and resigned. And within a week, I was going to shoot this police captain. And within a week, I'm in Chicago doing a fight scene with Chuck in the bar in Code of Silence. That's how fast life changes. It changed for me. From being a police detective, ready to shoot this dirty cop because covered up this murder and tried to set me up. Chuck called me and said, "Come up and be in the movie." So I just went and resigned, put my badge down, my gun, and I changed my life.
Good God.
That's
That's a movie.
That's in
That's a movie by itself. Every chapter in your book was a separate movie. I mean, it was just a movie. Your Vietnam experience was a movie. Your police, if somebody reads that Code of Silence, Code of Steel, I mean, oh my goodness, how you dealt with that on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah.
It was just traumatic just reading that as well. But the stories were great. They're entertaining. I can't wait for people to start reading your book and can share stories like we're talking about now. But it's mind-boggling what you've gone through, and really, what your experience in Vietnam followed you all the way to, of course, into the police world, and then even though when you get out of the police world, you're still a private investigator now. How long you been a private investigator?
Since 1984, so whatever that is, 38 years. And even though my wife and I have a private investigative firm, we take high-profile cases, and I've worked a case, really high-profile case in Daytona, Florida. Actually, I'm somebody and I won't name him on your show,
Wow.
but he had to choose somebody to come out of his karate school at 8:30 in the morning. This guy comes up, wanted money from him, and he says, "Go away, you're private property." So this guy starts violently attacking him. Because that even in such aggression, so he backs it up and he tells these enterprise, "Call the police because this guy's crazy." I keep coming after him. So my friend pulls the gun and fires toward his leg to try to make him back up. He thinks he's going to stop him that way. And the guy just kept coming at him. We had to shoot him right in the chest. The police come there. My friend calls the police as well as the two witnesses that saw him having to defend himself. But they come there. Put him in handcuffs and take him to jail for malicious wounding with a dangerous weapon that he could face 20 years for in prison. This just happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago. He did everything by the book, defended himself. And what happened is I got the body cams of all the officers and I reviewed them hours and hours and hours. I decided to be his expert witness on use of force. And so I hooked up with his lawyer from Daytona. And so after evaluation of all the body cams and stuff, I evaluated my determination was the police officers got upset with him because he invoked his right to remain silent. But he said, I want to remain silent. And they were read a Miranda warning. It made them mad that he didn't talk and confess of what was happening. Well, they had other witness statements telling him that this guy was crazy. He had to shoot him. He had to defend himself. They took him down, mutilated him. It was in the papers. It was on the news. I've got the footage of him in the jail where he's handcuffed and treated like a dog, and walked in there like a criminal. And so I did everything I could. Within 2 weeks, I had evaluated everything, wrote an expert report. The lawyer sent it to the prosecutor, and they dropped the charges Friday on him without him going to the first hearing, and said he should have never been arrested, which is what I did. So in this world, you can do everything right, and you can still stand there. You can call the police for help, but you can still go to jail when they get there.
Oh, yeah.
People haven't heard the last of this yet. We're considering civil litigation, and but the newspaper, they don't want to do a story if they find you innocent, or if they, the charges are dropped. It's not a story anymore. So his reputation and his karate school and everything has been in jeopardy because he's been arrested and charged like he's a vicious shooter of this innocent man. They even put a protective order on him. He couldn't go around this man, and they wouldn't release this man's name to the public. And I run a background on him. I got the name of the person because I have my sources. This guy had 68 arrests in Palestine, in a little town south of Houston. 68 arrests since he had been an adult with all kinds of aggravated violence. And he was actually, he was obviously a mental patient, which we call a Section 8. And even on the tape, he was saying that some guy named Bob and his friend was the one that shot him. Well, he didn't know, and they was trying to steal his truck. Well, in reality, this guy was riding a bicycle and stopped by to bum some money. And this guy was obviously just, I can't say a bum or a hobo, but he was a displaced guy who wanted some money. But when my friend said no, he turned violent and went crazy. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to do this. Well, he couldn't use these martial arts because the guy was too close. But if he hadn't used these martial arts and hurt him, they would have still arrested him for doing that. But he did what anybody else would say. He thought his life was in fear. He was in fear of his life. So he went for his gun. He fired a warning shot, and the guy kept coming, so he had to shoot him. Did everything perfect. The good thing is it's over. The charges are dropped, and he was vindicated. There was a letter we have from the prosecutor. But, he's having dreams. He's got post-traumatic stress from having to shoot this guy, and then the way he was treated by the police. And the people he protects, and he teaches cops too. Martial arts, Kurmagan. He's been a model citizen in that city for 28 years. He was no flight risk. There was no reason to handcuff him or arrest him that day. So being a retired police officer, it made me sick and nauseated watching the tape of how they treated him. A guy that was called down for help. And he's handcuffed, walking around in the parking lot, and they're mad. And I'm hearing them on their body cams off the record. You know what I mean? They're talking off the record. These body cams are going full time. And the officer arrested him said, look, I have to have a story. Since he won't talk to me, I'm taking him down. But he had a story. He had 2 eyewitnesses that saw that he had to shoot him. But he took him because he wanted to use his right to remain silent and to protect his civil rights. So, the way I see it, they violated his limit.
Well, thank God for what
I
you
got
did.
lucky on that one.
Yeah.
I've never had a case drop before and have to go to the first hearing. But it's going to be, you're going to hear a lot about it. Because we're just now starting to fight back.
Well, thank
They
God for
haven't
you.
even given
People
his gun back. The police department won't give him his gun back, won't give him his items. They took his DVR. They took his video surveillance out of his business. They won't give him any personal property back. He's called and called and called and went down there. They won't even return his call. It's like, they got his personal property. And they revoked his right. They put all kinds of orders on him to give up all firearms. They searched his studio like he was a criminal. They were looking for evidence. It was horrible. There must have been 25 police officers on the scene, 2 or 3 detectives. The guy that was there, that was shot, he got on a bicycle and rode off when he heard the sirens coming. They didn't even know he was shot. He didn't bleed anywhere. I've never seen a guy that didn't bleed, but he had a bullet in his stomach and he wasn't bleeding.
Wow.
And when they got out of the car, they had their guns on him, screaming at him, and he had his hands out laying face down. And I'm thinking, why are they so afraid? The guy clearly is no threat, and they're inching up on him with the guns. And what happened to these cops? They're so scared, and they use their guns first instead of their brains second. They pull a gun right away on everything today. And that's one reason I started a new group. It's on Facebook called Police Tactics Instructors of America. And in 2 weeks, I have 128 members from 5 different countries of people that have trained police officers in those countries. And we're going to standardize our techniques and stuff and try to teach these police officers to do better, to have better confidence in their open hand techniques and not pull their gun first, but last. What I was taught as a cop, our gun is our last resort, not the first result. You see them walking up to every car. They'll walk up to your car if you're just running a stop sign. They'll have a gun out, or they'll have it. They're scared of everything. It's a violent world, but you can't have your gun out. If you have a gun out, then that escalates the threat. That triggers their threat. And, I'm glad that we have the evidence on my friend's thing. And like I said, it's going to be something about civil rights and process and legal process, but that's one of the main things I do now. I get cases and people have been charged I represented a guy just recently that had to shoot a guy in a bar, and he was intoxicated. He admitted he was intoxicated. He was a local at this bar, and he had a little run-in with the guy, and they fought around the bar on the video for 20 minutes. There was a couple of women trying to keep them apart. It was an argument. They were just walking like a couple of old ladies. Nobody got hurt. But this one guy got pushed into a kitchen, and while he's in the kitchen, he grabbed a knife off the counter, and it was a big, like a butcher knife. So he starts sneaking up towards the client that I ended up representing, getting real close, within 2 feet of him. He has a knife right here ready to gut him. My client sees the knife, and he backs up, pulls his gun, and fires. He fires 7 times. He shoots him. The very first shot's in the head. Then he keeps shooting him because that's an instinct. But he was inebriated. He didn't remember shooting him. He didn't know until I got hired in the case almost a year later, Keith, that the other guy had a knife. The police never told him. And on the video, the guy that he shot had a knife. He was told by the police that he killed a guy in cold blood. And so I broke down the video frame by frame and millisecond by millisecond, not second by second, and showed the reaction of this hacker and how he reacted to this guy's action. So this guy escalated the situation with a knife, and he had to escalate and pull his gun that he had never done for the first 22 minutes and shot him to defend himself. And that's where the fear factor come in. That's where even an inebriated person is so drunk that they can't remember much, can still sense fear. They still feel it, and they still reacted to it. The jury said, "Yeah, we believe it." That was the case. It saved him life in prison. That was
Wow.
just like 3 months ago.
Wow. So,
These are great cases.
so do you find being a private investigator rewarding because you do handle cases like this and you get people exonerated that might go to jail? Is it a rewarding?
Well, yeah, I mean, my wife and I are working the case right now. We're doing it free because he has a really good kid. He worked for us on the farm here. My wife has a farm and the wedding barn here that she does venues, and he's working for us. In fact, he was working for a day. He got accused of this crazy crime with this girl. He's been in jail next month for a year without bond, accused of doing something the girl made up, like almost 3 weeks later, because she didn't want to be in trouble with her dad. He made up the story that he did something to her, and we're waiting to get a trial. So we're representing him free because that's the right thing to do. And we're going to get him vindicated. It's just a matter of this justice system around here would set a trial date. We had so much evidence. I mean, it's overwhelming. I feel 100% sure he'll be vindicated because of the evidence we got. The fact that she's lied on numerous people before, and the reason she would do it. Besides that, she's got these secret channels on the internet that I've been tracking every day and keeping documentation of what type of person she is. And it's just one of those unfortunate things that they didn't do an investigation. The police, I got the police report. They did a total of 9 hours of investigation in this case to arrest him on 5 felonies. He could spend 40 years in prison for it. And I probably spent 200 just trying to prove him innocent. So, they wrap it up real quick. They don't change their mind. They don't want to hear nothing else. They don't want to do any more investigation. They'll either take a plea or they'll go to court. They'll either win or not. They don't have any emotions tied to it. It's just another case, another number of a case. And, they dehumanize all these. In fact, at 6 o'clock tonight, we have to go see him. We go and see him once a week because he's been in there without bond almost for a year. And he's 18 years old. I mean, they got this kid over there, 18 years old, with these hardened criminals. Treating him like he's a monster.
Almost like you're a hero. It's like watching one of these TV series and you are a hero that goes in and helps save these people's lives. Let me ask you this. If you came out of the military now, let's say you were a young man now, knowing what you know now, would you enter the police force again based on how society is treating police people, policemen, policewomen, or would you just stay away from it totally?
Well, I had a need. I was addicted to adrenaline. When I come out of the Marine Corps, I mean, we didn't give a 19-year-old kid like me, and I was 20 at one point over there, an M60 machine gun and rockets and grenades and the ability and the free fire zone to kill anything that moves, take people's lives, if they save your life, have that much power in your hands. And then you get off of a plane, you're back in the USA, and you can't do nothing. You better not even jaywalk. You can't drive a beer. You can't do that. Well, you're addicted to that adrenaline because you survive on adrenaline over there because they're in the jungle. We're young kids fighting a war they've been fighting for 60 years. And those people were experts at jungle warfare. And we're just kids from West Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, poor white boys and poor black kids and some, Greek, he was Greek and some Puerto Ricans. And we're kids that couldn't go to college, dodge a draft. I mean, we're over there being soldiers. We don't want to be there. But that's the kind of that's who we were. But we had to adjust to get to that point because we were going to be killed if we didn't learn to do that. And like you said, you were an aggressive fighter and Chuck was an aggressive fighter. We went forward and charged instead of standing still and doing all that stuff. Well, we had to become aggressive too. And that's what when you read my book called Steel, I was aggressive and I got in trouble a lot because I did
Right.
some jungle techniques and things like that. But that was old school. And same thing in there. I mean, we as young men, we were asked to do things that we thought get us killed. We sometimes refused to go on certain ambushes or missions because it wasn't in our best interest. A lot of the young officers over there were stretched out of Quantico, and they didn't have any combat experience. So if you could be in combat for a month and have experience, a new person didn't have. So they would always look up there. Who's been there the longest? What should we do? We were in the jungle, no rules, no boundary. You're just in a foxhole on the side of a mountain in the jungle, waiting for them to crawl up and kill. Cut your throat or throw a bomb in you. It's either to kill them or not.
Well,
And, they did most of their fighting at last.
so let's say we're talking about now. You just got back from Iraq. Would you retire from the military? Would you just run your martial arts school, or would you serve time as a police officer now, knowing the climate of what's going on in the country today, or would you just not do that?
Well, I think it's what you feel in your heart. I mean, if you still want to help save the world, which I did. I mean, I'm still trying to save the world.
Right.
That's why I call it when I started writing on the fighter like 10 years ago, just writing those things, and the thing just come out. And I've been fighting since I was a kid, trying to have a stable childhood, a normal family, and things like that. And it just seemed like it was one of the things that God led me to do. I went through all these hardships so I could withstand all this stuff that I had to face. I mean, I had shoot several people just in the new look as a police officer, and I was ambushed and shot. I've heard a lot more as a police officer than I was as a Marine in Vietnam.
How about that?
I had more bones. You read about the broken bones, collarbones, fists, wrists, bricks thrown at me, shot my cruiser, shot up.
It's hard to read.
But what I learned, I love it though. See, I mean, I miss it now. So I work these PI cases because I get that adrenaline rush. We got to sport, and we're helping somebody. And my wife and I believe in fighting for people's rights. It's not about money; it's about doing what's right. And so, I mean, I would do it all over again. I have no regret.
Yep. That's who you are as a person.
And,
That's you as a person. That's why you teach the martial arts. That's why you were on the SWAT team and special tactical units and training. That's who you are and helping people. Let's say that if you could go back in time and you could go and see yourself right now, and let's say that you were 15, 16 years old and you time traveled. I just watched The Flash the other day, so I like time travel movies. What would you tell yourself? You tap yourself on the shoulder and you go, listen, Danny, I just want to give you some advice. What advice would you give yourself as a 16, 15, 16-year-old in the world?
Okay, let me see if I understand the question. I'm going to time travel back, and I'm going to a point in my life that I'm asking myself why I did it or what.
No,
What
not
got me
why you
there.
did it. If you could go back and you see yourself there, and now you have the opportunity to
Um,
go to yourself and say, Danny, I'm an old version of you, but I've got I have some suggestions for life or recommendations or some advice. What sage advice would you give yourself as a 16-year-old? Like now, I wish I knew back then what I know now. So what would you tell yourself
Yeah.
back then for advice? What advice would you have given yourself?
It's hard to say, but I will tell you this. I did great or think that I would be anything I've been. I mean, it happened so just like it just happened. You know, you're going through life and not planning nothing. You're nobody. You have no money. You have no place to live. You're broke. You come out. Even when I come out of the Marine Corps, I had enough to buy a car. I didn't have an apartment. You know, you had to struggle to make everything. So everything was, it's like it's written in the book. Nothing was planned. It's like I'm on this journey, you know, that God leads me through. And it's like, this is what you're going to do. So, you know, in just recent years, I've accepted that this is what he wanted me to do. And it's why I'm still here, because it's my purpose to be here, to keep fighting for these people's rights, because I have the ability now to make a difference in people's life. It's like I've been counseling some people online that suffer post-traumatic stress from the war. And, you know, after I get off the phone with them and stuff, I'm more stressed out than they are, because I still feel their pain, you know, and they're still suffering. And so, you know, it's never ending. And I guess till the day I die, I'll still be trying to help somebody.
Yeah, well, that's why we've remained friends for 30 years, or if not longer, 40 years. And I've always known who you were as a person. Of course, I respected your martial arts skill. I bought all your tapes, so I definitely respected your martial arts ability. But as a person, you were always so nurturing and loving, and you were such a great friend. You were the kind of friend to me, if I called you up in the middle of the night and I said, Danny, I have a problem. Could you help me? You don't go, what's the problem? You just say, where are you? You're one of those friends. You would say, you would
Oh,
just tell me, where are you? I'll be there. You wouldn't even ask me what the problem is. You would be there. So that speaks highly about your character and why we've remained friends for all these years. And I want to thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. And I promise you this, I'm going to promote it. Your books are fantastic. I've read them all. I'll buy the first ticket to go to your movie about your life story. I'll be sitting with Chuck Norris on the front row because it's fascinating. It's wonderful. And all of us Americans, and we have a debt to people like you, and especially you as well. So I just want to thank you so much for everything you've done. I want to thank you for being my friend for all these years. And listen, thanks for the podcast, and everybody watching this. You can tell we're good friends. And if you like this episode, I want you to like it and share it. And of course, subscribe. And until next time, ciao.